You learned yesterday that she's more than just a New York Times #1 bestseller. Learn more about Patricia Aburdene on Part 2, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on a soon-to-be-released book, Megatrends 2010, and we're visiting with its New York Times best-selling author, Patricia Aburdene. Good morning.
Good morning, Greg. I'm so happy to be here.
Welcome back for Part 2 to viewers and otherwise, and getting you back in. Of course, the excitement knowing that you've got to head back to Boston, get back to Cambridge, and out on the Charles River was cool. Seeing you write about the Charles River, and you do interweave it throughout the book, at different points throughout the book.
I do, and that may be because I have a special feel for the Charles River. Later in life, in my 40s, I moved back to Boston, back home from Washington, D.C., and I saw these scullers, these rowers out on the river, and I said, you know what? That looks like a great sport. How hard can it be? You get to sit down, right?
Oh, yeah, that must be, but it's pretty dang, it's a heck of a chore.
That was supposed to be a joke, actually.
Excuse me, that's right, for viewers who didn't catch it, yeah.
But, so I took up sculling, and what a wonderful vantage point to be rowing your scull down the Charles River and looking up at the banks, and it's a completely different perspective.
It must be, that's right, as opposed to being up on bridges and looking down at them. Yeah, that must be exciting. That is a chore. That's surely kept you in shape.
Well, it's a lot of fun. I always tell people it takes two years before you can get a good workout, because the first 2 years are all about not going swimming.
Staying in the boat, yes. What's it? And do you ever get stumped while you're writing and think, I've got to get away, maybe get out on the boat? Is that cathartic for you?
Oh, absolutely. I write in cafes. I go out for walks. The worst thing to do is to just sit there and allow yourself to be stuck. Right. Just stop, do something fun, and your subconscious will just keep working, and the next thing you know, you'll have an idea.
Share with viewers, for folks who obviously no one's yet seen it, soon to be released. We were fortunate enough to get a galley and really appreciate that. Hampton Roads Publishing was very quick to get it down, and they're also quick to point out we're the month of September, the middle of September, a month from now is when this will be hitting stores. But of course it opens up in the preface talking about what your mornings are normally like, Patricia. Share with viewers, obviously we're here at 7 a.m. You were up early this morning. What was your morning like?
Well, as I say in the preface to Megatrends 2010, The Rise of Conscious Capitalism is the subtitle of the book. I am a capitalist, and I'm also a spiritual seeker. Mm-hmm. So I wake up every morning and I light a candle, and I journal for quite a long time, well over an hour.
Really?
Yes, I do, because that's a way of centering within myself, a way of checking in with myself and centering. And then I usually meditate. And I find that an enormous way to clear your head, to connect with yourself, to feel grounded. And many, as I mentioned yesterday, many of the companies that I talk about in Megatrends 2010 have started sponsoring meditation seminars at work, because it's such a good way to do two things: to help employees manage stress and to help them access the really positive brain waves from which creativity, which we talked so much about yesterday, comes from. So there's a very, very important role for that. And then I usually turn on CNBC,
right,
the business-oriented cable station, and so I have this interesting way of sort of having a foot in both camps. A foot in the spiritual side of life, the quiet contemplative side of life, and then a foot in the frenzy of the markets, right, of the opening markets, and of capitalism.
Tricia, so oftentimes folks end the day and think, I needed a few more hours to get stuff done. Do they really have time? Can folks make the time to relax a little bit, to kind of meditate when waking up? Or obviously that's what you do, but should folks make that effort to find the time to do that?
They shouldn't make an effort. They should simply schedule it in. Schedule it in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in chapter 1, I talk about a wonderful woman named Ann Mincy. And in
Yes.
fact, you even said to me that you liked that story about her.
Yes.
She is a glamorous senior executive at L'Oreal, the
Right.
beauty company, the hair care company. And she was one of the most wonderful examples that I found of executives who bring their spirituality to work.
Mm-hmm.
And she tells the story about how she gets ready for the day, and she is a really smashing looking lady. She wears the most beautiful clothes, and of course her makeup and her hairstyle are just fantastic. But she says, I want to be spiritually ready for the day. So before I take off, I'm going to sit and be reflective. I'm going to read inspiring words to uplift my spirit, so that when I hit the street and the stress and the frenzy of the business world, I'm centered within myself. And so Ann Mincy is a wonderful example of how do you take that time? You schedule it. And every business person knows how to schedule time. And so many times, you know, in business, you go into the office. If I could give business people one bit of advice, I would say sacred space. Figure out how, if you like to think with a pen in hand and journal, not even about your personal business, but about your business. Give yourself the freedom to write about your business and to say, what's going on in the business? What are my priorities? What's really important today? What do I want to accomplish today? And you are the only person who can give you sacred space. And that's how you connect to that divine realm of consciousness from which all wealth is created.
When did you first start journal writing? Is that, I mean, when you think about that, if you're spending an hour in journal, that...
That's a quick day. It's often more. I just find so much sustenance and so much of my productivity comes out of the time that I take to be square with myself. Meditation, journaling, all of these techniques are directly linked to productivity, and that is one of the most exciting trends that I talk about in Megatrends 2010.
And we definitely want to talk about that, and I'm so excited we got into that yesterday. I want to ask you real quick, because when you're talking about the human spirit, it makes me think about a little line that I saw there right under Hampton Roads Publishing Company for the evolving human spirit. How'd y'all get teamed up for the publication of Megatrends 2010?
I sent the book out to a number of what you would call peer review people who are in the field of social responsibility and spirituality in business. And one of them said, you've got to talk to my agent. And I thought, I don't think his agent's going to help me very much, but I'll be polite and do it. And he connected me to a wonderful agent who brought my work to Hampton Roads.
That's great.
And they are a great company in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yes, absolutely. Very exciting. We're looking forward to the release next month. You know, when we think about the chapters and how you break down, of course, when you look through the opening of Megatrends 2000, for instance, which you all published back in 1990, and you go down chapter by chapter and know that each of those were recognized as individual megatrends.
Absolutely.
And we looked at one, I think one was the new defining role of women, or women in leadership, which was important to think about. And as we look in the front of Megatrends 2010, you see those 7. You talked about yesterday megatrend. Share with viewers again who may not have been with us yesterday, real quick, what is a megatrend?
A megatrend is a large social direction in which society is moving. It could be social, it could be political, it could be economic. And in Megatrends 2010, I've added some spiritual trends.
Yes.
So it's a really large, a megatrend influences our lives for at least a decade, often longer.
Can you think of a megatrend that was back when you all first, when you put out Megatrends back in 1982, that continues to today?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most exciting megatrends, it was called high tech, high touch. And that is the idea that as we introduce more and more technology into our society, we have to have a counterbalance of the human influence so that we keep humanity and technology balanced. And high touch is the counterpart to technology. The more television sets we have in our living rooms, the more we like comfortable, rich, sensual fabrics, or maybe quilts, or something that brings the human touch in to balance that technology. The more cell phones, the greater the interest in meditation and yoga. Yoga is an enormous trend. 16.5 million people practice yoga.
No.
10 million people meditate. And so as we have these Palm Pilots, these cell phones, these technologies, the internet, high-tech, high-touch, which we talked about in Megatrends, has just become more and more powerful. And in fact, you could say that Megatrends 2010 is sort of an ode to high-tech, high-touch, because the high touch of the spirituality that I talk about and of the social responsibility that I talk about is the counterbalance to all the technology in our society.
Golly, Patricia, how exciting just sitting here with you, knowing obviously the experiences, just hearing you talk about journal writing, just to hear you think about putting aside and scheduling in an hour or more each morning to commit before throwing on CNBC, to know those experiences are there for you on a daily basis, and that at the same time you're able to continue publishing much different work, but something that's probably still interwoven from much of your journal writing.
Well, it's absolutely essential, not just to my personal well-being, although that would be enough, but it's essential to my productivity.
Let's go ahead and get into the 7 megatrends, or the new list which you lay out in Megatrends 2010. Maybe if we can just go down chapter by chapter or megatrend by megatrend, giving folks a reason. The first one I think I saw, the power of spirituality, both personal and organizational.
Absolutely. Spirituality is arguably the greatest trend of our era. 95% of people, according to Gallup in the United States, believe in God. Gallup, back in 1994, took a very interesting poll. 20% of people said they wanted more spirituality in their lives. They took the same poll again in 1999, 5 years later. 78% of people, from 20% to 78%, said they wanted more spiritual growth in their lives.
That's answering the same question. That was answering the same question, and it grew that
the exact same way.
My Lord.
In the 1990s, people's thirst for meaning, for spirituality, absolutely exploded. Now that's kind of my point of departure in this chapter, because what happens when people follow their heart, when they follow their spirituality? A wonderful healing occurs. And as that healing occurs, something happens. People reach the tipping point. And what was a personal quest becomes more universal. You know, as they always say, the wounded become healers when they're healed. The warriors become statesmen. And I believe that the corporate managers and executives become corporate change agents as their personal spirituality. What's happening today in society is that quest for personal spirituality is spilling out into our purpose in the world. People want to put it to work. And I met many fabulous executives in researching chapter 1, the power of spirituality, who are bringing their spirituality to work. Ann Mincy, that I just talked about earlier, she considers that she is living, that her work is a ministry. It's a ministry for her of sharing with people what she calls the good news of inner beauty in the beauty business, which is obsessed with external.
Right.
A terrific guy named Greg Merton, a major top executive at Hewlett-Packard, was responsible for the multi-billion-dollar inkjet department.
Right.
Now, Hewlett-Packard has got a lot of problems, but they're not in the inkjet department. That is the cash cow of the company. And Greg Merton will tell you that because of the spiritual principles that he practiced and ran his operation with, how to forgive, how to give people the best intentions, how to structure communication in a company so that people are really not defensive, not destructive, but are really keeping their eye on the ball in terms of positive communication. He tells you that his spiritual principles put hundreds of millions of dollars onto Hewlett-Packard's bottom line. And he uses the example of how they built a new facility in half the time, faster than it's ever taken Hewlett-Packard to build a new facility. And that they needed the capacity to put the money right on the bottom line.
How exciting. Golly, these are practical examples that folks will pick up when they pick up Megatrend 2010 next month.
Name brand companies and senior executives and CEOs who are demonstrating that spiritual principles, that values are productive, are putting money on the corporate bottom line.
Let's get into the second megatrend that we recognize, and it's a phrase probably that folks want to have a full understanding of, the dawn of conscious capitalism. What is conscious capitalism?
Conscious capitalism is a grassroots movement to restore ethics and spirit to business. Now, it's a grassroots movement, but it is being reflected and embraced in the highest echelons of business. Conscious capitalism says old-fashioned capitalism was just about making a profit. Let's rethink this a little bit. Is there a smarter way to do this? Conscious capitalism is about definitely making a profit, definitely being responsible to shareholders, but also saying, who are the stakeholders in our organization? And if we function as a whole and honor them also, our employees, our customers, you got to honor your customers, but how many companies do we know that really don't? And your suppliers, and kind of take a holistic view of business as a system. What happens then? Well, the evidence shows that companies that take a more holistic view, rather than losing profit, actually outperform mainstream industry. There have been a number of studies that show that. There's a wonderful periodical called Business Ethics, and every year it puts out its list of the top 100 best corporate citizens. And they use a formula to measure all the different stakeholders that I just mentioned.
Right.
Employees, the communities, suppliers, all of this kind of thing. A study was conducted at DePaul University which showed that the 100 best corporate citizens outperformed the rest of the S&P 500 by 10 percentile points. That was just 1 year. Another fascinating study right along those lines took place over a 15-year period. The management consultant called Towers Perrin studied a number of companies who excel in these stakeholder relationships. They included companies like Coca-Cola and Southwest Airlines and Cisco and several others. Over the 15-year period from 1984 to 1999, these, let's call them stakeholder superstars, outperformed the S&P 500 by 126%.
Wow.
So there's this mythology that we have in our culture that if you're going to be socially responsible, if you're going to be a good corporate citizen, be prepared to suffer financially. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. Study after study show that corporate social responsibility correlates with greater profitability. So that's the good news.
Oh yeah, very definitely. And I'm so glad that Perrin Tippin, you said?
Towers Perrin.
Perrin, forgive me, that they made the effort to go after what some would consider, they wonder about Coca-Cola or Southwest Airlines, but those are folks that really do oftentimes think beyond just profits. You know, Coke saying, we want to refresh the world, or Southwest Airlines saying, better than driving. I mean, they really want to make an effort to provide some meaning to what they do. Absolutely.
And another terrific example is Fortune Magazine's 100 Best Companies to Work For. You know, I just always look forward to when that issue comes in January every year, because it's so exciting. So Fortune puts out this list with an organization called the Great Places to Work Institute. So they did another study, and they said, if we look at the public firms on the Fortune Best Companies to Work For list, let's compare how they do. Well, over the course in the period from 1998 to 2004, that included some really good years in the market and some really bad years. So it's kind of representative.
Yeah.
The S&P 500 went up 39%. Over an 8-year period, not great, but okay. The public firms on the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list went up 176%.
No way. Wow.
Versus 39% for the S&P 500. So again, here's this mythology that we have, that if you're going to spend all this money being nice to your employees, blah, 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 it's not going to pay off. Well, the facts show something else.
Golly, how exciting. I need to go look at that list in a different way now. That's going to help my my stock planning for the next few years. That's great.
You know something? I always tell people that. Look at what your broker recommends, and then compare it against the top 100 corporate citizens in business ethics, and see how many of your broker's recommends are on the Fortune 100 Best Companies to Work For list. If it's on both, that's a pretty good sign.
Absolutely. And you talk about really making sure there's an effort to look into socially responsive companies, socially responsible companies. Excuse me. You talk at times about values-driven and value-driven. That little S there makes a big difference oftentimes.
Oh, absolutely. Can we skip to Chapter 5? Because
we better jump
should we stay in order?
No, that's right. Let's
go to Chapter 5.
Absolutely.
That's just a good chapter.
The values-driven consumer. Thank you. We've got a few minutes, Patricia. Excuse me. Go ahead. Yes. I mean, we're the time is flying, so I want to make sure we can truly drive home the values-driven consumer.
That's a good one. That's a good chapter. Let me start by saying, at the end of the day yesterday, you said, Patricia is talking about how every one of us has a role in accelerating the transformation of capitalism. And, so many times we forget that consumers make up more than 2/3 of the GDP. It's actually 70%. 70% of the GDP is consumer spending. So every time you or I make a choice, we are influencing capitalism one way or another. And values-driven consumers say, I want my values, whether that's for good health, or maybe it's for preserving natural resources, or maybe it's for the environment, to be reflected in the spending decisions that I make, in the purchasing decisions that I make. And there's a fellow named Paul Ray who wrote a terrific book called The Cultural Creatives. He was in market research for many, many years and studied how do consumers make decisions about what they buy. Is it because of their income? Is it because of their demographics? And he discovered that to a large extent, people's values and lifestyle influence the kinds of purchases they make. So a values-driven consumer is the kind of person who says, I want my apples to be grown without pesticides. I want to buy organic beauty products. I want to purchase 100% recycled tissues. I want non-toxic paints. When your values influence how you spend your money, that is a values-driven consumer. And values-driven consumers are a $230 billion market. So it's an enormous amount of money, and it represents something like 60 million people who want their values to be demonstrated by their purchase. Who are the folks behind the boom in hybrid cars?
Right.
They are putting clean automotive technology on the map. I heard a story the other day that the Toyota Prius was the fastest selling car in the United States since 2002. Fastest selling, not necessarily best selling. The Toyota Camry actually is best selling in terms of volume. Fastest selling. How quick does it disappear off the showroom floor? And so this year, 200,000 people will buy hybrid cars. Every one of those people is a values-driven consumer. All of the people who are fascinated by green building. You know, when we think about the environment, we tend to think the bad guys are the cars. They definitely do their part in terms of pollution, maybe industrial production. But very few of us remember that 65% of electricity consumption is from buildings. 30% of the greenhouse gases are from buildings. So in the past 5 years or so, there's been this enormous boom towards green building. It's gone from sort of a hippie fringe thing to really so mainstream that the National Association of Home Builders is studying green building and surveying people as to how much they want it. So this gives you an idea. When you buy a hybrid car, when you buy insulated glass, insist on insulated glass for your home, when you shop at Whole Foods and insist on organic food, you are voting with your values, and you are changing capitalism with every expenditure. You have power as a consumer to do that. And you certainly have power as an investor.
Absolutely. Those are great words. Patricia, thanks so much for being with us this morning and making yesterday and today a true treat.
Thank you, Greg. It has been my pleasure to be here on Carolina People.
Absolutely. We'll have to get you back. Sorry we've run out of time.
My pleasure.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We'll use 7 words twice. Leading from the middle. Spirituality and business. Those 7 words are 2 key megatrends, 2 of the 7. That 7 goes throughout the book. Those are 2 great megatrends. The other 7 key words are Megatrends 2010, the rise of conscious capitalism. What's it all about? If you've been here the last 2 days, you'd have a good sense of it. You've got to wait a month, though, to get a real sense of it. It'll be available in stores. Megatrends 2010 will be out. Patricia Aburdene's making a difference every day, not because she's leading, focused on what Gordon Gekko was focused on with greed, but because she's leading with her heart. You heard her talk about her mornings. Her heart has to be a center part of her life, and it is every day. Get ready for it. Megatrends2010.com. Check it out.